You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
And, of course, we're here to give you even more Star Wars discussion. And it's really funny, too, because this whole possibility... Now, is this a rumor or has this been confirmed? I haven't actually looked too deeply into this, I have to admit.
It's more or less confirmed. I mean, it's not like Disney's come out and said it, but I mean, according to the article, multiple sources, and they even made mention that they really did look to make sure, like, okay, yeah, this is
right, that it was a thing.
Reasonably sure that that's really a thing.
Well, I mean, David joins us. He says, "Hello, gentlemen, Star Wars Day." Hey, in our world, every day is Star Wars Day. But I do understand the sentiment. And I have to say, it's funny because it would be really sad. Now, again, if we were talking about Dave Filoni leaving Star Wars, I think this would have an entirely different tone. Certainly a different conversation, right? Because I think that if you were really weighing the two, that in the end, Favreau is really a fantastic director, movie maker. I think he was the key to getting Filoni to the point to where he could actually do something as far as directing live action. So, I mean, I'm not saying anything to say that, hey, look, this is not a big deal, because it is. But here's the thing. So I started last night. Was it last night? I think it was last night. I started watching the Fallout series finally. Now, anybody that knows me knows I've actually played, a number of the Fallout games. Fallout 3, Fallout 4. I haven't really messed with New Vegas much, but the reason why I'm bringing this up is because, obviously, this is another project that's on Amazon Prime that is essentially an adaptation from source material. So in other words, the universe exists, but they have to come in and do it. And I have to say, it is flawless. I mean, the execution, everything. It nods to the source material. So if you actually played the games, your enjoyment of it probably would go up 30-40%, because there's so many nods to the games in there. But if you never even touch the game, it's still an incredible series. And as I'm watching this, I'm probably in the middle of it right now. I could not help but wonder, why can't we get this kind of thing for Star Wars? Why is it so hard? It's like you have these other guys out there with these other IPs, and they're doing these amazing things with it. But then it's almost like when Star Wars hits. Now, again, we did do a show on this once. I think we came to the conclusion that it's the meddling of Kathleen Kennedy and maybe just people concentrating too much on this has got to make billions of dollars or something instead of just letting it be what it is. So I think there's that. But I don't know. I actually think that when I see something like the new Fallout series, which, again, I mean, I cannot recommend this thing enough, guys. If you've never even touched the game, it doesn't matter. The story is amazing. And it's really well done. And I hope that maybe we could see this again in the Star Wars universe. Now, Ted Adam Green, of course, joins us once again. He says, "Hey, guys." Hey, what's up, Ted? It's good to have you with us. Mm-hmm. But you know what I mean? This is a kind of thing that... And this is why I wonder how... And I guess this is probably how we're going to start the discussion, is let's just assume that this is a done deal, that he is truly leaving Star Wars. Mm-hmm. How big of a deal is that?
I think it's still a monumental deal. Of course, we don't know the inner workings of Lucasfilm or Disney and what's going on, behind the scenes, per se. I mean, we know Bob Iger, he's trying to, save Disney from gouging money. I know that's one thing that he's been concerned with. I know that, we have Kathleen Kennedy. We will always, mention her with her meddling and, with her, idealistic approach to a lot of Star Wars content. So what I think honestly is Favreau represents some level of stability because Favreau actually has live action movie experience. Filoni is a great storyteller, but we know him primarily from animation, and he's phenomenal. We just talked about the Bad Batch. Like this season so far, the Bad Batch has been like a rock star season, so far. So we know he can tell stories. It's just that can he really execute that when it comes to live action? Now we've seen a couple of forays where, okay, of course, Favreau's been behind the Mandalorian. That was kind of like his flagship in the first. I'll probably say, a couple of seasons were, at least the first two were really good. 3, it kind of slipped a little bit. And now they're talking about 4. Season 4 is no longer going to be 4, but it's basically going to be 2 episodes as a movie or as a film or something like that. So, and that's the Mandalorian and Grogu. Now, if Favreau leaves, I don't know I'm sure he'll probably be calling Favreau, of course, just say, hey, I want your opinion on this. But having him around to kind of guide him as far as when it comes to live action, I still think Filoni still needs some more work. Now, I don't know if they're going to bring someone else in to help him out when he's doing this stuff, and Favreau wants to go off and kind of do some other things. That may be possible. I'm not sure. But I think it is still a great loss because we're still not confident in Filoni's ability to execute live action Star Wars. We've seen the failures of Ahsoka. We've definitely seen the failures of Book of Boba Fett. And we've seen some of the tarnishing in the armor, as it were, in the Mandalorian. So it's still not rock solid yet. So I'm kind of leery of them just giving the reins completely to Filoni to let him just do his thing. But I guess we're gonna have to wait and see. But I think we also I'm hoping that they bring someone else in to kind of help further tutor Filoni as far as executing a lot of the Star Wars content.
Well, and I think it should be said that exactly. It's like, and I've seen this happen with a lot of rock bands in the later years. A key member will leave, and everybody, and then of course the albums don't go in the direction that people want. And they go, see, ever since that guy left. But the one thing that they ignore is the last couple of projects that involved that key member really weren't that great either. It's like they're almost referring back to a classic period in the band's history. And it's kind of like, well, you are all saying, hey, they should bring, whoever the member is that had left that they think would be the key to the future success or whatever. It's like, well, if you remember, last few albums before this guy left really weren't, you were complaining about those actually. And I think that where that comparison works here is the fact that you just brought it up. Like a lot of these live action projects with Favreau there haven't really knocked it out of the park, shall we say. And so it might actually be time to bring in some new blood, because you also have to look at Ahsoka. Here's something that's interesting. The one live action thing that critically, now I know it didn't land with some fans, but critically, Andor was widely celebrated, had nothing to do with Filoni and Favreau. That was all Gareth Edwards. Or, actually, no, it was Gilroy.
Tony
Gilroy. So it's kind of like maybe the future isn't Filoni and Favreau. Maybe it's because, again, what I think should happen is something similar to what Lucas was doing during Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. It's like, look, you steer the ship because we know Filoni is a creative director. So that's kind of where Lucas was as well. And he's also the key storyteller, which also is where Lucas was. But, you got to find your Irvin Kershner or your Richard Marquand to maybe bring that project to fruition, in a way that doesn't compromise it just because you want to cut your teeth on live action or something. It's like you go out and do an independent film. Don't do that with Star Wars.
Yeah, it's almost kind of like that's too big of it's like you don't want to give your teenager who's just learning how to drive the keys to your, um, your Rolls Royce, as a like, okay, now you just started driving. Here, take my Rolls Royce and start driving around. Like, no, you might want to get them that, you know, Nissan Altima or something or Corolla.
Yeah, you give them
Um,
like a beat up car or something like that, to sort of learn, and something that isn't
you know,
as valuable. Because that's what we're talking about. We're
exactly.
talking about the value of the IP and Star Wars, especially now. Because this is something, look, if you wanted to do that in the beginning before it took too many hits,
Mhm.
maybe when your shields are down like 30 or 40%, it's okay. But when you got like big hull breaches and
Yeah, the
you're
ship's
kind
on
of,
fire.
yeah, the ship's on fire. I mean, we're talking like the Revenge of the Sith thing where Anakin and Obi-Wan are bringing it in, and that's really where Star Wars is at right now, to be honest. They're still flying
Yeah, I
half
mean,
a ship, but it's half a ship.
yeah, exactly. I mean, one of the things I didn't think about, all the other pieces to Star Wars. We often talk about the films and the television shows, but another big, huge aspect is toys.
Yeah.
Toys they've had to shut down factories
Mm-hmm.
because no one's buying this stuff. No one's buying, Star Wars lightsabers or characters anymore. Because quite frankly, no one's really interested. So, and that's always also been. I remember often talking to you, Eric. In our friendship and getting to know you, you often talked about like, hey, when you as soon as you left the movie theater, begged your dad to take you to this toy store, and you got a couple of toys, because it had impacted you that much. Well, kids really aren't really into it like that anymore. And then the other thing I'm thinking about as we're talking about Favreau and Filoni, so I wonder if there's a difference because we're talking about live action, right? Now, Favreau is good with movies. We've seen Jungle Book. We've seen, of course, the Marvel franchise, a lot of the Iron Man movies.
Mm.
He's done really well in, right? Those are films, but we're also talking about a series, technically. So it's almost like not just directing for a film, but also directing for a live action series is also a different beast in within itself. Because now,
Right.
you kind of have this somewhat episodic story that's, we've often talked about, like, uh Andor being like a basic essentially an 8-hour movie. You just broke it up into chunks, but you still kind of have to it's still broken up though. And you still kind of have to direct it
Well, and
that way. And it's
according to this, he has done, he's done some stuff for Friends, King of Queens, Dinner for Five. There's television shows that he's definitely done. There's actually quite a few, honestly.
oh, Favreau, yeah. No, I'm not worried about Favreau. What I'm
Oh, you're
saying is
talking about
Filoni.
Filoni.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
because
that
like,
makes a
okay, we're
difference.
yeah, because yeah, I'm just saying because like we just widely know Favreau from his films, but I know he's done television as well. But what I'm saying is when you have trying to give the reins to Filoni to
Well, but
essentially
again, though,
take the ship.
Filoni, yeah, but Filoni's still mainly writing. I know he's directed a couple episodes here and there, but Favreau has still been more the one that's been involved that way. And pretty much every episode has been done by all these different directors who have done a bunch of
Hmm.
stuff. So I think with
Yeah,
with that, Filoni, that's really where he's at. You know what I mean?
where
It's
he
kind of like,
shines.
yeah, he's writing. Now you're right though. It's like if he has to now by himself has to carry on with the TV stuff, that could be bad. Now, let me get this one in from David. Of course, I'm gonna have to finish. I'm gonna have to add to the character count in this thing because I think that's why it's chopping this stuff off. He says, "I hope Happy doesn't leave Star Wars." I love it. He gave us Iron Man, and Star Wars needs an equivalent. I saw a Yahoo article from 3 days ago saying he's supposed to direct a Mandalorian film. Is this true? Yeah, not only is it true, did we do a whole
Hmm.
show on it yet or no? I know we,
No, we kind of mentioned it.
yeah, maybe we've been mentioning it. We might not have done
There's
an
not enough
entire show.
information quite yet to.
Well, when's that
Well, we
stopped
were.
us? It's,
That's true.
I mean,
Well, it's in regards because we were talking about.
Man, I
season
know. I
4
could have
of The
sworn we did.
Mandalorian. That's what we
Yeah,
were talking about. And
well,
then
maybe that
it
was
was
it.
made mention that season 4 could be that they're gonna scrap season 4 and make the Mandalorian movie instead of season 4. And
Yeah,
that's basically
this is
supposed to
sad.
cap this off.
I'm looking up our own
So,
channel.
um, so one of the things, you know, that they talked
Oh,
about,
that's what it was. Is should the Mandalorian season 4 be a movie? We actually asked if it should, and then, in typical fashion, not too long after that, news came out that it was going to be.
mhm,
So yeah,
yeah.
but it is true.
Um,
I mean, as far as that goes. Well, let me just get this next thing in here because David has a follow up. So if he leaves, is he leaving after he directs that film? Yes. That's
yes.
something that we should point out. None of this is happening until after the film, which right now is called The Mandalorian and Grogu, which
Yep.
sounds like a buddy cop movie or, like Turner and Hooch
Yeah.
or
uh,
I can think of a lot of
Butch Cassidy and Sunday's
Yeah,
Kids,
exactly.
you know,
Right,
you
exactly.
got, but it says Favreau has his 4th season of The Mandalorian painstakingly mapped out, ripped from him. Now he's making a movie out of the last 2 episodes he had planned, but they're not even his. Dave Filoni has been brought in to plus those two episodes into something theatrical that can be tied into his Thrawn Ahsoka story. Imagine being Favreau and you're finishing out your contract with the movie, and the guy in the cowboy hat with no theatrical experience is now co-writer and co-director. They may not call him a co-director yet, but I wouldn't count him out given his position at Lucasfilm and his desire to build a resume in film. So I'm reading that from the source of this whole conversation comes from That Park Place, where they kind of just went into this whole thing, and it's theoretically the Mandalorian Grogu movie is supposed to come out in 2026, and yeah, this is supposed to be, as David would say, happies. He likes calling people by character names, but Jon Favreau, who played Happy in the Iron Man movies, yeah, this is supposed to be his last hurrah in the Star Wars franchise, and then he's gonna kind of move on to something else. And like I said, with the Acolyte coming up, you know, there's some concerns about that as well. So, like you said, Eric,
Well, but
Star
then
Wars
again,
is
that
flying
was
half a ship.
That's Leslie Headland's thing, though.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying Star Wars as a franchise. He was just because David was
Oh,
making mention that he needs an equivalent. Like we need an equivalent to um, what he did with Iron Man. I'm just naming different directors now. Quite frankly, I mean, I think um, what's her face? What's her?
context.
I know the daughter of
Oh, Bryce Dallas Howard.
Bryce Dallas Howard. Thank you.
Yeah, she's the
Bryce
one that
Dallas
should
Howard.
actually be spearheading the films, to be honest.
Like Bryce Dallas Howard is a phenomenal director.
And she needs to be the new Favreau.
She could be, yeah, she could be the new Favreau. I think.
I think she would be better, actually.
What's I can't. It's hard to say his name, but it's
Oh,
like
the
Fumayea.
Fuyama. Yeah, I know what you're
Yeah,
talking about.
he has a
Rick,
very
right? It's
difficult.
Rick
Yeah,
Fuyama
Rick
or whatever.
Fumayea or something
Or,
like that. Yeah.
or your mama or whatever. I know I probably shouldn't say this like on a YouTube.
Oh my god.
The comments.
Wait. Yeah. Oh my god.
in this day and age, it is not good for somebody like me to actually be saying things like this.
Oh.
I should have texted that to you and let you say it.
Okay, wait. I'm getting it together. Oh, that was a sneak attack, man. All right.
I'll be here all night,
yeah.
folks.
Yep.
Until I'm canceled by YouTube.
Right, exactly. But
No, he would.
but
He
yeah,
would actually be.
he's
He'd be
done
good.
some great. He's done some great stuff with the Mandalorian. Some of his episodes that he directed. I know there's still talks about Taika Waititi um, doing
Yeah,
something.
that's something I
And
would have
I'm
thought would be good like years ago. Now,
yeah, that now, yeah,
after Love
and
and Thunder,
also,
especially, it's like,
yeah,
no, we need to keep him away from Star Wars, actually, especially when you hear his pitch for it, because that's what he wants to do. He wants to, I mean, and here's the thing I don't understand. I'll say this really quick about Taika Waititi. It's like, why would anybody be entertaining considering his pitch when you fired Lord and Miller? you
yeah,
essentially
exactly.
fired Lord and Miller for the same thing. Now, granted, I guess if he was doing his own original thing and he's not like torching Solo, I think that maybe that was the big part of it. But I don't know.
Possibly, but
I
I mean, and see, and that's what I'm saying. Like, you have to see if Taika Waititi got his hands and did a Star Wars film, I think that would be, and David's going to hate me for this, but I think it's going to be essentially like what they did to the Fast and Furious. How the first two movies started off as a drama, and it was more about street racing, and then now it switches to like
right.
this whole Mission Impossible, situation where it's like, okay, now we're doing all this impossible stuff that makes absolutely no sense, and just for thrills. And I don't think Star Wars needs that. Star Wars definitely has a lane. It's no different than Harry Potter. It's no different than your Twilight series. It has its own lane, and I think that's where it needs to stay. And I think Bryce Dallas Howard understands that. I think Rick understands that, and I just really want we just really want good direction and good execution. Part of the problem also I'm wondering too is because Bob Iger is trying to tighten the financial belt with Disney and Marvel and some of the things. I wonder if that is also playing a part because sometimes, like when we looked at Andor looked really, really good because it was all shot on practical location. I don't think maybe one or two scenes out of the whole series were shot in the volume.
I was gonna
Everything else
say,
was
man, if that's the case,
everything else
hello
was there.
volume. Yeah, yeah.
So it's like, but I would rather them be on practical location and don't use the volume because it brings that feeling of Star Wars back to the screen that we all love.
Well, yeah. I mean, the practical effects thing. I mean, I would say use the volume for things that really
That you
require
absolutely
that.
have to. Yeah.
Right. But now this is interesting. So Star Wars Eddie joins us. He says hello and also brings up this question. And this is because I hadn't heard about this. It says, did you all hear about the Forbes article about Disney lying about the sequel trilogy profit it made?
No.
No.
No,
And I
I
mean,
didn't. I haven't heard that one.
and it's funny because every day I'm constantly scanning for anything written about Star Wars. I mean, a lot of it is because of this show, right? I
Of the
mean, there's a lot of
show.
reviews that
Right.
we do. There's a lot of things that we do where we explore a certain theme or character or, film or whatever. But then there's also the other shows like what we're doing now, right? Where we're talking about more current events type stuff. And no, I
Mhm.
hadn't heard that, but it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't really surprise me. Because
Yeah.
obviously they got to show some things. Obviously they have to, and look, they spent $4 billion for this franchise. Actually, over $4
Mhm.
billion. I think it was like 4.5 or 4.6 or something. So, and the thing is, they need to keep their investors happy. And, we always talk about Investors Day. That's when we get a lot of big announcements. And then, of course, this ties into what you were just talking about, where we're talking about Bob Iger trying to stop the hemorrhaging because while in his absence, Disney was just, I mean, they've just been doing
Bleeding
all the
money.
wrong things. They've been bleeding money like no tomorrow. They keep trying to cram all these social agendas into everything that they're doing. I mean, look at the Snow White backlash. You got the Daily Wire now making their own Snow White movie because everybody, when when they actually announced the Snow White movie being made, and they had that actress going out and saying all these horrible things about the original, and how inappropriate it was or whatever, and how she's gonna. I mean, it was just like when you look at a lot of this stuff, it's like this Disney is not only destroying things like Star Wars or Indiana Jones or things like that, they're destroying their own projects, their own classic stuff that has stood for 70, 80, 100 years or something almost.
Yeah. Oh
And
yeah, and it's funny that you go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, I was just going to say, I mean, everybody's just going, okay, guys, enough is enough. And of course, Bob Iger comes in and he's like, okay, we have some problems. We got to fix them. Although he's not necessarily free from the whole woke thing either. But at least he has a little bit of a finger on the pulse of where the line is for people.
Yeah, I mean, and this article kind of reflects that. It says, yes, there are those who are looking forward to a second season of Andor, and I'm sure there are some fans. An upcoming acolyte television show made by former personal assistant to Harvey Weinstein, Leslie Hetland. But yeah, don't yeah, that was
Well,
just kind of
you got to
nicely put
start
in there.
somewhere, right? I'm sure he didn't
But the
mess with
numbers
her.
are, but the numbers are few. After all, we can demonstrably say, look at winning ratings for shows like Ahsoka or box office disasters like Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and that's not even to mention the other parts of Lucasfilm beyond movie and television production. Do we really need to revisit the just closed hotel experience at Walt Disney World that couldn't even fill 100 rooms consistently?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So Disney's, like I said, like you just mentioned, Eric, Disney's in trouble. Disney is, and they're putting out, you know, um, with Marvel, it's not holding up, what it used to.
Nope.
When you had like David was saying, Iron Man, when we had the Avengers and all those movies, like that's when Disney and Marvel was like really just blowing everyone out of the water, and it was blowing the box offices, you know, by storm. And then now that you have Chris Evans, who's no longer returning as Captain America, you have a lot, of course, Robert Downey Jr. is not doing it. Um, and now you have all these different shows that you're trying to bring out, and you're trying to, um, and we kind of heard about superhero fatigue. People kind of had that fatigue, like, okay, another superhero movie I gotta follow. Geez, we just
Yeah.
got done with okay, can we get something else for a little while and then come back to this? And I get it, and so
But I
I
don't know if
think
that's necessarily the case. I mean, I could see that, but I think where the fatigue is coming is just bad movies, right? I mean, I think that if they had continued at the same level as what they started out being, now I agree that you would probably want to space out the projects more and, maybe do one a year, not
mhm.
two a year, along with all these series and stuff. But again, I mean, I was on board when they had, what was the Scarlet Witch and, what was the series? Oh man, I can't believe I blanked on this.
Oh, you
Um,
talking about
uh, this is awesome.
you talking about you talking about the one with Vision?
Yeah, I just
Um,
completely blanked. WandaVision. That's what it was called.
mhm,
Yeah. So when you had WandaVision, Star Wars Eddie just put it in there too. Thank you. Yeah.
mhm.
WandaVision. When you had that, that was a really well done show. Loki season 1. I haven't seen season 2 yet, but season 1 was good. I actually like the one, honestly.
Uh, Captain America and Winter Soldier. That
Well, I mean
whole
that was basically a really good film. Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. The Falcon and
the
the
ser- the
yeah,
Falcon
the
and the
series.
Soldier or something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was good. The one on oh, wow, I can't believe I'm blanking on all these. This is hilarious.
it's fatigue, man. You got so
I
much.
know,
That's what
right? I
it
mean,
is.
this is so
See?
but this is so bizarre. Um I can't believe this is so embarrassing. Jeremy Renner's character.
Oh, Hawkeye.
Yes, the Hawkeye series. The Hawkeye series was really surprising. Now, that was one of those where when I remember when it was first announced, I'm like, really?
Do we
A
really need to see
Hawkeye
this?
series? But I got to tell you, man, it's one of the best Disney Plus shows that they've made. I mean, it's actually honestly, it's a great show. And
But
it was really well done.
I think it's, once again, I think it's the execution. I think there's a lot of things that go into that. I think it's execution, marketing, all of this. I think it's kind of all played a part as to why, Star Wars is kind of failing. And,
Yeah.
with Jon Favreau leaving, he was a form of stability, but I think he's even realized that he can't save it all, and he's got to kind of like move on.
Let the past die. Kill it if you have
Right.
to. He's like Kylo Renning the thing. Let me get to these chats because they're all coming in like furiously. So David, this is another one that cuts off. I'll have to finish on here, but he says, I agree with Mr. Vansel. Oh, hey, we got a good start so far. He's not a fit for Star Wars. In this age of relativism, everyone wants to speak their truth in a Star Wars movie. I gotta find this. Here we go. Instead of respecting the source material. Yeah,
Absolutely.
He goes on to say, in light of superhero fatigue, do you think there needs to be a tone shift to a more grounded reality like Andor? I can't believe I'm referencing Andor. I know, see?
Yep.
One day we're going to convert you for season 2.
I don't think so. I don't think you need a more ground, because let's just face it, superheroes movies aren't meant to be grounded.
Well, but no, I understand
fantasy.
what he's saying, though. Because if you look at a lot of the later ones, I mean, look, think of the original Iron Man movie. One of the things, or think of the original Captain America, even the original Thor, like a lot of those movies were grounded. I mean, they were still somewhat fantastical, but I remember one of the big things that critics used to say is that it has comic book themes, but it's not a comic book movie. They're not cartoonish. They're actual films. They just happen to have that subject matter. Whereas if you compare like the original Iron Man to something like, all this multiverse stuff going on and all that, and it's just getting so convoluted.
Well, okay. So, but see, this is my thing. So, and I just had this conversation with a friend of mine because she was asking me, like, why does everyone hate the George Clooney Batman so much? And I just went on a tirade about why it sucked so bad.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know how big of a Batman fan I am. So, and I basically was alluding to the fact that I was like, they might as well have Adam West in there, and they just might as well have put Pow Bang and all the onomatopoeias popping up out of nowhere because it was so campy.
Like Egghead could have been the villain.
Exactly. Or the King Tut or whatever.
Oh, yes.
Like, okay.
Egghead and King Tut. There you go.
Yes.
That would have been the pairing right there. I almost want to do that now.
Right. But see, make it grounded in reality at this point. But but no, I mean, and I get what you're saying as far as like, so those origin stories are easy to do because usually they're birthed out of some sort of tragedy. So it's easy to ground those stories. But as you move along the adventures, depending on the character you're talking about, it's going to become more fantastical, if you will.
Well, but what I'm talking about is like the difference between, like, say, Thor Dark World versus, like, now Ragnarok, I actually thought had a good balance between, like, it was funny and campy, but it was still cool, unlike Love and Thunder.
Yeah.
Well,
I guess what I'm saying, like, okay, if you do something, and I guess Guardians will probably fall under that whole fantastical thing too.
Mm-hmm.
But
another great movie,
I mean,
Ant-Man and Wasp, or Ant-Man, the original one.
Yeah, but I think like if you're grounding in reality, that's fine. But I think like if you're following source material, it does eventually get to that point because you have to remember they're comics.
I don't mean
that's
grounded in
material.
See, you're adding the word in reality. I'm not talking about grounding in reality. I mean more grounded, meaning more tempered, a little bit like less, like you're dealing with like it's an actual cinematic film about it kind of goes back to that whole Martin Scorsese thing, where he said they're not real movies, they're just eye candy. Because that's what they became. But they didn't start out that way. Even the more fantastical ones, like a lot of the Avengers movies, you know, they weren't exactly grounded in reality. You can't say, even Captain America Civil War, you can't say a lot of this stuff was like grounded in reality, but it was grounded in the terms that they were actual movies that were paying attention to things like character development and things like, you know, good writing, plots, execution, direction, all of that stuff, versus just being pretty much a VFX reel for somebody.
Okay.
You know, so that's pretty much what it comes down to.
Okay. So to that point, yes, I agree. I think, so to your point, that's why I thought the Batman versus Superman was a great one, because it dealt with consequences. That's why I think with the Civil War was great because it dealt with consequences of their actions. Like, hey, you guys just can't be flying around doing stuff without any supervision. Like, you guys are blowing up buildings. You don't know who's in there. You don't, you know, you guys are just kind of taking it upon yourselves and doing stuff. And there's consequences that come with that. So I like the drama that comes with that, and it's, like you said, more grounded. I'll leave out the reality. It's more grounded, and that's fine, you know. But
actually, you can do that though. You can even say grounded in reality, because one of the things we talked about A New Hope. You know, A New Hope everybody loved it and said that it was groundbreaking because, it felt like a lived-in universe. It wasn't all clinical and pristine or whatever. There's a certain, there's like a certain groundedness to that, right? I mean, that's sort of grounded in reality. Like, you could relate to that because it looks like a real place versus what we got in later Star Wars films.
Yeah, well, it's like Teletubby Land, right? True.
Yeah.
And of course, but yeah, the themes, yes, because when you have, like, we always talk about the fascist empire when we're talking about Star Wars, you know, those are things that, okay, people can basically say, like, the empire was Nazi Germany, essentially, and you can put yourself in that, or you could put them in that space. It's relatable, it's believable, things to that nature. And so, yeah, like, I think that's what's lacking, is really just the strength of character development. And we're not just putting things in there just like, oh, cool, look who can do with a lightsaber. Like, we don't need a bunch of different, you know, like a lightsaber whip just to have a lightsaber whip. Like, that's unnecessary. Like, I would rather you give me a regular lightsaber with somebody and give me a really good battle that means something, that actually has. And I was just watching I was watching this thing on YouTube, and the wrestler Triple H, he was talking about, of course, his industry, and he made mention, he was like, you know, I would rather watch a movie that has so much drama that leads up to one gunshot, but when that one gunshot happens, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe they shot this person, as opposed to something that just has, you know, machine guns and all types of explosions just going off. And it's like, it doesn't mean anything to anybody. It's like, oh, okay, cool. Next. We saw that in John Wick. Okay, what else is new? You know, where's the story?
Well, and that's another good example too, right? Because the first John Wick movie, a lot more grounded. It still had the elements, but it was almost like they kept upping the ante for each movie. By the time you got to the fourth one, it's like, well, now I'm watching a video game. I mean, I liked it still, but it was just like, okay, you know, at this point, you can't say that's almost like the Fast and Furious thing you were talking about. Let me get to some of more of these chats. So Star Wars Eddie has a couple. He says, X-Men 97 is amazing, and Deadpool and Wolverine looks great. Yeah. And again, and I'm not saying that, like, when you go back to Logan, right? Like, Logan was super grounded in reality. And it's nice to have movies like that, but I'm not saying they have to go too far the other way either. Right. And that's where you're getting something like the Deadpool and Wolverine film, X-Men 97, and then he says, wish they give Star Wars a better treatment like they do for Marvel. And yeah, I mean, that's the thing is that, and I think it's because you have to look at the source material, right? With the Marvel comics, you have, like 70 years or something stupid of all this source material done by different writers. There's been all these different versions of it. I mean, if you even look at Spider-Man, there's like 3 or 4 different series they used to have. The Spectacular Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, Spidey Presents. You just had like all these different, and they all had different tones. Whereas with Star Wars, it came from the mind of like one guy. And sure, it's coming up on 50 years, but still, there is a smaller box of what, for parameters that you have to more or less stay in. Otherwise, it won't be Star Wars anymore.
Well, and that's when we talk about source material. Like, I really, and you and I have talked about this, sometimes ad nauseum, but the books, you have so many really well done books.
I know.
That if you would just take, like, Bloodline, we always talk about that one. If you just took the story of Bloodline, if you put Lorna, is it Lorna Dern? No. What's her daughter's name?
Billy Lord.
Carrie Fisher. Billy Lord, thank you. Billy Lord. You take her, make her Princess Leia, and have her do Bloodline. And just find a way to adapt it into a screenplay and just do that. Or we always talk about Lost Stars, or I would love to see, if you want to do prequel stuff, Lords of the Sith would be a good one to really just really explore the torment of Vader. Like, not so much him just running around, killing a bunch of rebels, but you're really dealing with, like, okay, the psychological effects that's happened to him as a result of his decisions and what Palpatine is doing to him. Like, once again, I think we always kind of looked at Vader as human. We've always humanized Vader, but I think this would even deepen that, because it's like, okay, well, man, he really is tormented because he did all this stuff for the noble reason. And that's one thing I love about the Bad Batch, is because they really isolate a subject matter, and they really show you, like, okay, what the Empire is really truly doing to the galaxy. And you're seeing it through the eyes of this group of, reject clones on their adventures. And I think that's really cool. And I think if you did something like that, where you show, hey, we want to show how powerful and how evil Palpatine is or was, do Lords of the Sith and show him, like, how he would turn Vader's suit off just to make him suffer, or to keep him in line, or just do things that cause him pain, or because he wanted him to be darker, and then show how that affects Vader and how he misses, like, man, I could have had a family. Those things are cool. The aftermath of Bloodline, when the New Republic finds out that Leia is actually Vader's daughter, can we really trust her? Like, that's phenomenal. Like, that is an amazing angle to play. Just do stuff like that, and you'll have people.
Well, on top of that, and you're just bringing up the stuff that has all the, say, the classic characters, your Leias, your Palpatines, Vaders, all that, right? You can also go into the books. Stars. Well, yeah, and Lost Stars, Lost Stars is like Lion King 1.5 in that sense. Yes, it's, you're seeing the events of, well, it kind of starts into the Clone Wars, but you do see the events of the original trilogy. You're just seeing it through the eyes of new characters. So you can do that. You can also go into different realms, because one of the complaints that a lot of fans have is, well, you need to get beyond this. You need to get beyond the Skywalkers and all the classic people. It's like, fine. Now you could do the Thrawn Ascendancy books, because that doesn't even take place in the core worlds at all. It's all in the unknown regions. All new characters. Make sure you have Thrawn, but other than that, it's basically like a new thing in the Star Wars universe. So you do have a bunch of books that you can get source material, or you can go to the comics too. That in a lot of ways, that's even a richer universe in the books. Where's the Dr.
Yeah, I
Aphra
mean,
movie? And her whole thing with
Crimson
Vader,
Dawn.
the Crimson, yeah, where Kira brings back Crimson Dawn, so you have basically the Crimson Reign, and then War of the Bounty
Or the
Hunter.
Bounty
You have
Hunters.
all these great series that take place. See, that's the problem. It's almost like they're telling the wrong stories, right? Like
Yeah,
they're
absolutely.
you bring up Lords of the Sith.
Absolutely.
It's like, how about Lords of the Sith instead of the Acolyte, right? Instead of giving us, a more.
Or I like the whole concept of the acolyte. I mean,
Well, we have to see how the
like I said,
execution
but
is.
and that's the point. Like the concept is good. I'm in love with that. Ever since I heard about it, I was like, ooh, I can't wait to see what that looks like. Now that I've kind of gotten a glimpse, I'm like,
That's the thing. It's turned to
Yeah.
cautious optimism.
Yep.
And pretty soon, probably after the first episode, it's like, well, maybe it gets better by episode 4. That's basically what our lives are now.
Yeah.
You start out excited. Lord bless the Star Wars fan, because we always enter in every project with, well, maybe this is the one. Basically, Ted talks about Hawkeye. He's like, Hawkeye is my favorite MCU Disney Plus as well. It is. It's like one of those sleeper series that you don't think is going to be that interesting. And yet, it's just really, really good. Star Wars Eddie basically says a prequel about Palpatine. We've been saying that for a long time. In fact, you could make the Acolyte work that way, because remember, the Acolyte takes place like toward the tail end of the High Republic. You can bleed that again. It depends on how many how many seasons you want to go, and then it also depends on what span of time you're dealing with, say between each season. Are you gonna go like 5-6 seasons and have it butt right up against the Phantom Menace? You could do that if you want. And if you do, you can totally drop the entire Palpatine origin story, his whole training, his betrayal of Plague. You could put all that right in there neatly, actually.
Yeah.
Or you can save that for something else.
Yeah, I want to read this quote that they had in that article that we were talking about, because we were talking about films, and that's what I was trying to find. There's one quote from Favreau in 2023, but our sources tell us that this was from his commentary on Lucasfilm looking to do the Rey movie before it was announced. It isn't likely to be related to him continuing in any way. So here's the quote. There's definitely a conversation that's going on, and then also what happens after the sequel trilogy. Because the sequel trilogy only takes place over the course of a few years, and it's a big thing on the screen, and it's very eventful. But it is a relatively brief moment in history over the course of 1,000 years that Star Wars happens to take place. And so what happens after it is very interesting too. And I know that there's some discussion, exploration going on about what happens after that. So I think that there are certain markers that we have, and it's more like studying ancient history, where you kind of have to know a few things that happen, but there are a lot of murkiness in the in between, and we just don't have the archaeological evidence in the real world to exactly know what happened. So we kind of connect the dots. So once again, it's just like, that's the other part that I think with Favreau leaving is also the understanding of Star Wars too. We always talk about that, understanding what Star Wars is. We talked about that one documentary they did after the season 1 of The Mandalorian, and they really kind of explained. Even we did our own thing, like, what is Star Wars, right?
Yeah, whole series.
Because you really do have to understand like the concepts, what the spirit of Star Wars really is. It's not like any other franchise that's really out here. It kind of stands in its own category. And I think that's also a factor when it plays into Favreau leaving, because you're also taking away someone who gets it. Now, my thing is, are you going to replace someone else who truly gets it, or are you leaving it up completely to Filoni to now explain to other people and to try to get and to motivate. And that's the other thing too, is because with Filoni not having as much film experience. See, if Favreau says something to a director, the director probably can understand what Favreau means
Mhm.
because Favreau's done enough live action. Filoni has not. Even though he's been around it, he may not be able to convey certain things to other directors like Favreau would. So that's the other part too that when you asked me the question at the top of the show about, you know, about him leaving, how big of a deal is it? I think you also missed that little piece too, which is can actually turn into a very big piece.
Yeah. Star Wars Eddie basically says DH Ian McDermott. LOL. I mean, look, I'll, you when you're talking about bloodlines, I would be fine with a DH Carrie Fisher, honestly. I mean, they got enough footage of her, DH her, give her the AI voice treatment, re-speech, like what they did with Vader and Obi-Wan. And I mean, I think you're good. I mean, the technology is only going to get better. I don't necessarily, I mean, honestly, I think that that's probably one of the more intelligent uses of this technology is, look, when you get actors that are too old, or maybe they pass on, or maybe you want to jump around timelines too much and you can't because, we're all aging in a linear fashion, right? So, you could even go as far as to really de-age, like, hey, I wonder, let's get a bunch of, I mean, it's almost too bad they didn't just get, well, that wouldn't have worked really with the Vader thing, but you could get what somebody looked like as a kid, like Leia, right? And just age and make I'm not suggesting they could have done that really with where the technology was at the time that they made Obi-Wan, but you know what I mean? It's like you could start thinking in terms of this as everything gets better. You don't necessarily have to recast. I mean, obviously, especially where the technology is now, it might be better to do that. But what I would like to avoid is, okay, say you take Billy Lord, or my personal choice, Millie Bobby Brown, and you say, okay, you be the next Leia. Well, then what happens when she gets too old? Now you got to have a third Leia if you're going to tell stories. You do the de-aging, you do all that, you still have the original person, and you can just ad nauseum make as many things bounce around the timeline, it doesn't matter. Now, of course, and we did do a whole show on, a lot of the ethical and legal and all the implications and, the dangers of it and all that stuff. So if you go back, we did a whole thing on, a lot of this AI and de-aging and all that, did a whole show on it. But, without necessarily rehashing that particular show here, I do think that it's a good use and an interesting use, but you have to have a responsible use of it as well, right? I mean, you do have to do it responsibly. It has to be guided, but I think I don't think it's unreasonable to do a de-aged Ian McDermott. And even if you wanted to, he could still do the voice, of course. But at a point, if he lives to be almost 100, like James Earl Jones is, you don't want him squeaking out lines. You can always pretty much just use the re-speech versions.
Re-speech.
Yeah, and that would be fine. I mean, the only thing is, before we romanticize Favreau too much, my question would be, how much of the missteps of the shows are directly attributed to him? I would like to know that before I necessarily think that it's a big loss. Because everybody's like, oh, maybe you understand. Yeah. You understand Star Wars. Really? Whose idea was it for that whole kitchen scene in the Book of Boba Fett, where Boba Fett was acting like an idiot?
Oh, running around like Ratatouille.
Yeah. Who was the one that turned Boba Fett into like this pacifist versus what he was in the Mandalorian series, which that's what you figured Boba Fett would be. Or any of the other dumb decisions. It's like, before we go saying, hey, this is a really big loss or something, I'd rather have somebody that I know understands Star Wars, like a Bryce Dallas Howard, in there instead of him. Unless it turns out that Favreau's going to Filoni like, hey man, I don't think you should do this, and Filoni's like, no, we're gonna do it, and that kind of a thing. We don't
Yeah,
know.
or we don't know. That's what I said. We don't know all the inner workings, and we know Filoni, and that's what happens with those shows is, um, I think you had different directors for
Oh,
Book of
you
Boba
did,
Fett,
and look, I get that.
and that's what I mean, and
You're right.
so. And that's what I'm saying. It's hard to kind of figure out which strand to really pull to figure out what the problem is.
Well, I'll tell you a problem. I mean, it sounds like I'm all cranked up again. I'm really not, but I do think, even though I can definitely see the argument for both, I think it's a good idea to do like what they did with Obi-Wan, even though that may not be the best example, because I know there were a lot of problems with it. But you had Deborah Chow. She was the one that completely did Obi-Wan. It wasn't
the whole thing.
Because the problem is when you have an episodic show, like say a Law and Order or something, that's going on for decades now, and they're very self-contained episodes. Sure, there's a story arc that runs through maybe a season or something, but pretty much they're self-contained episodes. Even Smallville, which that definitely had a more serialized feel. Yeah, okay, fine. You could get different directors in there, but it's really like they're recycling the same ones, and you agree. I do think that there needs to be some cohesion for a 6-episode series or an 8 or 10 episode series. If it was going on for like 22 episodes a season, yeah, maybe get yourself like 3 or 4 directors that you just keep recycling through the season. But as short as a lot of these seasons are, I don't know if that's a good idea. And I know that they do have a director that'll do like 2. Okay, you get these 2, you get these 2. But in the case of a lot of them, you might have the director directing like episode 2, and then they come back for like 6. Like they're not together.
No, I mean, I definitely get it, man. It kind of runs into the whole sequel trilogy problem almost, where you have like, okay, you got a bunch of different directors and no one's talking to each other, and no one's really trying to, okay, we have to keep this tone. We have to, and you got one director trying to do one thing over here. You got another one over here trying to like, no, I think we should take the character in this direction. You got Ryan Johnson trying to do his thing. It's just, it becomes kind of a mess, as especially if all of them are not on the same page as far as what's going on and how this has to pan out. So that's a very valid point, though, Eric. As far as I think when you have shorter series like this, that's why we had like Tony Gilroy, like he did.
I was going to say that, yeah, he did all of Andor. I mean, you can tell,
and you can tell, yeah, definitely, you can tell.
But here's another key, though.
And,
not only did he do it all, as far as directing, he wrote it. Yeah. See, I think the other problem with the sequel trilogy that made it even worse was not only did you have director switches, because remember, I mean, a lot of times people go, well, wait a minute, though, JJ did, 7 and 9. I'm like, yeah, but he wasn't supposed to.
Right.
It was going to be 3 different directors, and then, of course, that problem hit, and then he had to scramble, because then, of course, he's got to rewrite it, and then, of course, they had different writers. I mean, at least that they had a consistent writer for all of them.
That's the other thing, too. Sometimes, every director is not a good writer.
Oh,
and sometimes you have to have, you have to stay in your lane and know what you do best and just do that and don't do anything else. It's like, hey, look, I can, like, and you have some people who are really talented where they can actually do both. They can write and direct. And some people can write, direct, and act in their own thing, and it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Those are just, the trifectas, the world. But, there's some people who should just, what? I'm a director. That's all I need to do. That's all I want to focus on to deliver the best product. And I don't need to try to, I might have some ideas, or I might send some stuff back like, hey, I know you wrote it this way, but it's really not looking, it's not working on screen. Can we punch this up, or can we change this a little bit? Fine. But to kind of come up with the whole story and then turn around and have to orchestrate it all, one is a huge task, but then now it's also, you're really putting yourself under the barrel of the gun, because now, you can't say, oh, well, I just directed what was on the page. It's
Yeah, well, and I mean, and I get it. I mean, that whole episode 9 debacle, that that was a little, that might be an extreme example. But, I think that the rest of them, let me see, there's a couple of more. Star Wars Eddie has a couple more here. He says, I really hope he doesn't leave.
why.
I mean, it would, yeah, that would be the thing. It's like, why? Because again, I think that you have to go back and say, what is his contribution that would make him indispensable?
hmm
Because his biggest contribution in my eyes, and don't get me wrong, I mean, he's,
Yeah,
he's a
we love
great
Favreau,
director.
don't get
We
me
love
wrong.
him.
Yeah.
He's good. But I think his primary role really is to mentor Filoni.
hmm
But the truth is, you could
Absolutely.
get anybody to get in there and mentor him. That's good. I mean, really, for that matter, who you really get to replace Favreau is Spielberg. That's who you
Spielberg.
get.
hmm
I mean, if you really want to restore Star Wars to its former glory, that's what you do. You get the guy that's been involved in it with Lucas almost from the beginning. And then he goes on to say, I think Favreau is better than Rian Johnson. Well, yeah, I mean,
Well,
for
once
Star
again,
Wars, maybe.
okay, because I was about to say, because now you have to be specific. Are you talking about Star Wars? Or are you talking about being a director overall? Because Knives Out was phenomenal.
Yeah.
You know.
But I mean, again, I guess you could look at it from, you go Looper, Knives Out, The Last Jedi or whatever. You look at maybe what Favreau's done, you go, okay, maybe there's more variety there. Maybe you just like the movies better. That's another thing you got to look at too, right? I mean, do you think that they're technically better, or do you just like them better? I think that you do have to add some of that objectivity in there. That was
Yeah.
that's what we always fight with David about every time that we discuss, well, especially Andor.
Right.
But I mean, even with some of the other stuff, it's like, no, dude, they don't suck. You just didn't like it.
hmm
Or maybe that wasn't the best thing, because again, I mean, technically, and again, you can go back and watch, well, the audio version when The Last Jedi first came out was the very first podcast that we did. It was actually the second. The first one we did is, how we got into Star Wars and why you should even listen to us. Like, who are we? Why listen to us when it comes to this stuff, right? The second one, though, we did review The Last Jedi. It was an audio-only podcast. Then when we went back and we did the whole What is Star Wars series, we did an episode on what Star Wars is and what makes it different from every other franchise and all that. But then we went through and we meticulously reviewed every film, including the standalone ones, I think, right? I'm pretty sure we did the standalone ones too.
I don't think we did. I don't think we did.
I'm going to look it up. I think we did. But either way, we went through and we did The Last Jedi again. And we talked about it. And again, it was like, we came out of the theater, we didn't talk for probably like 5-10 minutes.
That's
Because we
still
were
one of my funniest moments.
It is.
Trying to process.
Yeah, trying to process it. I mean, it was tough. I mean, it really was. Yeah, we did. We did we did them in our What is Star Wars series. So, The Last Jedi, we decided, yes, it had its issues, the Canto Bight scene being one of the biggest, but it had problems. The direction that he chose to go in may not have been the right one, but it was a bold choice. A lot of people have said, well, we want Star Wars to take chances and do all this stuff. And then he takes the chances, and then you're like, well, no, now you ruined my childhood, that kind of thing again. But whether or not we really wanted that to happen, our biggest criticism is the fact there was no plan going in, and more than anything, whether or not you agree with what Johnson did with Luke Skywalker and some of the other characters, the biggest issue was none of this was planned. It was almost like choose your own adventure, right?
Yeah.
There should have been the 3 directors get together, because that would have softened the blow, by the way, of Trevorrow being let go and JJ having to come in. Because remember, JJ executive produced all of them. So if he was in there and all 3 directors had gotten in a room with the story group and Kathleen Kennedy, and they hashed out a basic story, and they basically went to each director and said, okay, it starts here, it ends here. You could do more or less what you want in the middle, but you got to start here and you got to get to this point.
Mm.
And you basically have the overall story, and it's cohesive. Then I think it would have made a lot more sense. I think even some of the chances that Rian Johnson took maybe would have been a little bit, contextually speaking, it would have been a little bit more accepted. People still might not have agreed with the decisions, but I think within the story, it wouldn't have seemed so jarring. And then, of course, when Trevorrow was let go, they could have, okay, well, you got the story. You just had to pick it up for where Johnson left off and then bring it to the conclusion that you had worked out in like 2013 or something. Instead of, well, now what are we going to do? Right? It's kind of like, because if you go through, and we did a show on that too, it's almost like I'm plugging all of our past shows while we're talking about this, but we did do an entire show on what would have been called Duel of the Fates, and it was just meticulously going through Colin Trevorrow's script and his idea and, what would have been better. And, of course, you have to take that with a grain of salt, too. We said it during the show. Like, look, just because it looked amazing on paper, it could have sucked as a film.
Yeah, execution,
direction, acting, everything, yeah. We don't know. But, and that's the problem. It's just they need to bring somebody in. If Favreau is truly leaving, maybe he won't. Maybe he'll change his mind. We don't know. The Mandalorian and Grogu, the movie, is still long enough away that things could happen and maybe he can reverse the decision. But one of the things that you're finding, and I suspect that this has a lot to do with him leaving, is he probably feels choked by Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy. Like, you can do this, you can't do this, and it's stifling.
Yeah. It's the end of his contract, and he's probably like, look, we didn't have the success that I probably thought, and I want to get out before he goes completely.
Yeah, right. Before fan backlash, all my movies are torching.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a good thing Rian Johnson put Knives Out after that, because that was the only thing that kind of swung him back, like, oh, maybe he doesn't suck, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I guess, look, let us know what you guys think. There's a couple of more polls I intend to put up. But let me give the results of the last one. That's what I usually like to do toward the end of the show. I like to go to whatever the last poll is and give you guys the results of that. And so the last one was talking about Rebel Moon Part 2, because we reviewed Rebel Moon Part 1 because it was supposed to be Zack Snyder's Star Wars movie. And then, Lucasfilm turned it down. So he reworked it a little bit, releases Rebel Moon Part 1, Child something. I don't know. I don't remember. But we reviewed it. And so the question is, well, Part 2 was just released last week. Do you guys want us to review that? And unanimously, 100% you all want us to do it. Which is weird. I think this is one of the first polls where we got 100% results. So, you guys, as Kroll would say, you have spoken. So we'll listen. So we'll try to, arrange that, because we both have to try to watch it, and then, which I plan to do anyway. But, we'll try to make that come up pretty soon. Because obviously we got a couple more episodes of The Bad Batch left that we got to review. Then Tales of the Empire comes out. There's a couple other things that we want to talk about on the show as well. So we're going to have to work this Rebel Moon review in there somewhere. But we will get to it. And then there's other polls that I want to put up. Not necessarily like, who do you think had the coolest lightsaber or something like that, but really more like, some show direction stuff. Because I always like to get you guys' opinions, because you guys are the driver's seat of the show. We don't just make these for ourselves, we make them for you guys, right? So we want your input, because hopefully you guys will, keep watching the show and keep finding interest in it and share it with all your friends, and we can build this community. Speaking of which, please don't forget to hit the like button, because it really does help the channel. And you guys all know the deal, right? You guys watch a bunch of YouTube shows. You see every YouTuber on the planet always asking you. Sometimes they're putting up like little graphics and all kinds of stuff to hit the like button. But if you do get something out of this and you enjoy discussing Star Wars with us, we are trying to build the community, so hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. And yeah, it looks like Friday. Hopefully I'm not lying this time. And I know our schedule has been a little bit crazy. We apologize for that, but just keep an eye. If you hit that notification bell, by the way, when you subscribed, you will get updates on when we're live. So now more than ever, you might want to hit that bell. I'm just saying. All right, so with that, we'll see you guys hopefully Friday. Either way, we're going to be reviewing episode... what are we 14. On? 14. Yep, 14 of The Bad Batch, which is coming out this Wednesday. So, with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.